Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the Scottish Property Podcast. My name is Stephen Clark and I'm joined as always with my co-host, Nick Ponty.
Do that again.
Fucked already. Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the Scottish Property Podcast. My name is Stephen Clark and I'm joined as always with my co-host, Nick Ponty. How are you doing, Nick?
I'm all right, Stephen. Yes, it's late on a Thursday night here. We're recording this podcast. I saw you were up in Aberdeen again today, so well done for showing up tonight. You must be tired, boys.
As always. So this week we're going to cover what we think is very important. So we're 3 months into lockdown, and it looks like next week the property market is going to open the doors back up, and we're going to get started back in our investment and development journey, whatever we're doing in our property businesses. But we thought we would take the opportunity to cover what changes have happened in the last 3 months. So legally and financially, there's been quite a lot of support by the government and changes made by the government. So we thought it'd be a nice time to go over basically the stuff that we think everyone should know as a landlord or an investor going what's happened the last few months and what will affect them going forward. Is that right, Nick?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we've got 10 points that we want to run through, which will basically bring you up to speed on what's happened in the last 3 months. And it's going to be a quick summary. But see, before we get into that, Stephen, I want to pull you up, first of all, for using silk paint on one of your refurbs. So I was shocked to see this in your Facebook Live today on the Scottish Property Podcast. So how did that happen? How did that happen?
I done a live on our Facebook group today just to give a project update and how difficult it was kind of trying to get a couple of refurbs over the line during the lockdown period. And the biggest issues I had was materials. And one of them was I went in to go and pick up the grey paint from B&Q, and there was only one tub left of the usual mat. And I thought, fuck it, I'll be okay. I'll just use the silk. So grabbed 4 tubs of the silk, and it just looks horrendous on the walls. Like, it looks really bad. However, I found out something today. I learned a lesson that apparently you're not meant to put silk paint on directly fresh plaster. Apparently it's a no-no, which I've done. And then someone actually said to me, messaged me and said, actually, silk paint's better for buy-to-let properties because apparently you can just wipe it clean, which I never really knew either. So,
yeah, well, absolutely. I can vouch for that because we actually used silk paint in our last house on the hallway and the stairwell, the staircase. Because see with the kiddies' hands and stuff like that, it was easier to wipe. So it's quite good for buy-to-lets, but like
it doesn't look like Man Armour style, does it?
Doesn't look the best. But I love talking paint, by the way. See, on paint, what do you use for the woodwork? Is it gloss, eggshell, or satin?
Eggshell, yeah.
Eggshell, me too.
8 gloss. Gloss is so like a 1990s, like just eggshell. Or if I can't find eggshell, satin. But yeah, water-based satin.
Great stuff. Well, that's enough about paint. Let's move on to this week's.
Should we get a quick catch up? What's been happening this week with you?
Yeah, well, this week's been. I've actually done pretty well on the virtual viewings. So on the letting side of things, running the letting agency, I've been doing is doing the Zoom viewings actually. Mm-hmm. So lining up tenants to come on. I go out there, obviously myself, to the property. Then they jump on. I say to them, just like we do on the Monday night, I say, just drop your questions in the chat box. And if you want me to go in specifically on any room or focus a bit more in detail on the kitchen or the bathroom, and it's been really good. And I've actually managed to rent about 3 properties just with the virtual viewing. So I've been quite chuffed with that.
That's really good. Aye, really good. Good result. Do you think that'll change the way people or tenants or people view properties moving forward if they can't quite make it because of the due work commitments? They won't miss out on a property. They'll just take an opportunity to do a virtual viewing, basically.
Definitely. I think it's going to be, I'm going to set it as part of my standard procedures now. So as well as going and doing physical viewings, I'll also put out an email to tenants to say, look, you don't have to attend. If you can't find the time or you're working or you can't get away from work, then I'll do a Zoom viewing as well. And I think a lot of people, especially now with the PRT, you only need to give 28 days notice. There's not a huge risk. If you don't like the property, you can be out within 28 days. So it's like, what's the worst that can happen? You move in, it wasn't what it looked like on the video, the tenant gives 28 days notice. I think it's going to be a huge shift. And especially as well on the people who are investing for buy-to-let purposes. Mm-hmm. You know what it's like? Not every, I've bought properties where I haven't gone and viewed before. I'm sure you have probably as well. I think that's something that I would like to see from estate agents using a lot more as well. I think it would save a huge amount of time.
I think you're probably right. I've always found that an issue with estate agents, and not necessarily the last few years, but when you were working, in 9 to 5, and estate agents are open 9 to 5, so trying to view a property to see a property was always very difficult. And estate agents would usually just send a viewing agent out on a Saturday, so you couldn't really get much information. So yeah, I think it could be a bit of a change in the way we do business.
I was a bit dubious at the start, and the video viewings, like the recorded video tours that I was sending out, they weren't really getting much in the way of people saying that they would take the properties. So I think folk, if they actually see you standing in the property and they're able to actually interact with you live, I think you've got a better chance, basically, of getting it rented.
Do you think it's just the way the world's went in the last couple of months? I mean, we started off doing Zoom calls for the podcast. We got more comfortable with it. When we went in lockdown, we started doing Zoom calls for networking events with the podcast group members, stuff like that. And I think everyone just became comfortable being in front of the computer, talking to people. Do you think it's became just a little change in society that it might be that easing it into doing virtual viewings going forward?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like even the tenants that are coming on, they're not scared to show their face and speak on the camera, especially the younger generation as well. I just think that now people are so used to it. People are on Instagram constantly, TikTok as well, doing their dances and stuff like that. Everyone seems a lot more comfortable now, on video. I think we noticed this as well on our Zoom chat as well. It started off where I think you had mentioned that like people were
I know what you're going to say.
No, people were coming on, and they've obviously, made themselves presentable and all the rest of it. And then, we noticed it just recently. People don't care now, just come on.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, look at the state of my hair here. You can see.
Yeah, I think I noticed at the start with females that joined our Zoom calls, in particular, they would come on and it wouldn't be their face; it would just be their name on the screen. They wouldn't even show their camera. And then when they did show their camera, a few weeks into lockdown, it would be full makeup done and hair done. And then just recently, it's just been like, yeah, everyone's just as they are. They're sitting in their house, they're engaging with properly people, discussing or getting educated or chatting away. So I think people have kind of got used to it, just adopted it as part of the normal now.
Cool.
So let us get started on this next. I know you're dying to talk about this subject. This is something that you've got a lot of expertise on as a landlord and a letting agent. You have to be on top of the ball when it comes to all this legislation side of lettings and what changes have happened. So do you want to kick us off with the first points? I think it's all going to come down to the legal points to start with.
Yeah, so I think we can skim through this quite fast. We're not going to bore you with it. We'll just if you've got any more in-depth questions, then get us on the group. We can go into more detail. But the first thing I put down here is the Fair Rents Bill. Now, this is not actually COVID-19 related, right? This is actually was put out to a public consultation by an MSP last year, where they basically said that they wanted to make it so that landlords had a capped amount where they could increase the rents, because as it stands at the moment, in a private residential tenancy agreement, a landlord can increase the rent one time over 12 months, but they can increase it as much as they want. So what they're saying is they want to put a cap on it. This is Polly McNeill, I think it's a Labour MSP who's proposed this bill. It's now gone through public consultation. It's now been introduced to Parliament, so it's not a law yet, but all the members of Parliament now need to vote on it. And my feeling is it will become a law, and the main changes that will happen are that what they're proposing is that now if a landlord wants to increase the rent, they can do that once every 12 months, but it has to be in line with consumer price index, which is effectively the inflation rate. So at the moment that runs at about 1.8%, and it obviously fluctuates, it goes up and down. And as somebody made the point the other night there, it can go into negative as well. But it's CPI, Consumer Price Index, plus 1%. Mm-hmm. So you're basically talking about, at the moment, in effect, you could raise the rent by 3%. Now, on a £600 a month rent, that's not a lot of rent, really.
No. Yeah, and would you raise that rent and affect the relationship you've got with the tenant for the sake of them maybe leaving and going elsewhere? and then leave having a month's void period?
Probably not. And that's the thing where I don't think it'll really affect, that many people anyway. Because if you're a sensible landlord and you want to keep the tenant long term, you're probably not going to whack your rents up anyway. Now, interestingly, this doesn't affect you. If the tenant leaves, right, then and you start from scratch and
You can put the rent up.
you're advertising the property again, you can decide. So you could go from like £500 to, £700. There's nothing stopping you, right?
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, I've never put my rents up on any of mine either, and for the same reason, why rock the boat, piss a tenant off, they move out, you've got a void period, and it takes you a year or year and a half to make up for the void period you just lost out on for the sake of £15 a month rent. But
Yeah.
like you say, if a tenant moves out, then you can reassess the market value rent, and if you need to put it up, then it can go up significantly.
Yeah,
So yeah, that makes sense.
another thing in the bill is as well is when you do your landlord registration, one of the questions is going to be they're going to be collecting in the data and how much your rent is. So you'll need to put that figure in at the landlord registration process as well. So
Yeah.
that's
Is that a new
probably
thing as
enough
well?
said about that. I think it will probably come in. It's got to be voted through in Parliament, and I think you'll probably see that come into effect. Some people are saying it's a bit kind of like coincidental that it got introduced to Parliament during the kind of coronavirus period where tenants were sort of struggling to pay their rent and all that. But anyway, that's happened. So
Good. So next one, thanks for covering that. What's your next point?
next one is that there's been some changes to the eviction procedures. Now, at the moment, this has been put through Parliament as an emergency coronavirus bill to change the way that you can evict tenants, basically. So I'll give you the dates here because it's date specific at the moment. And this only applies from the period from 7th of April 2020 to the 30th of September 2020. And it basically says that if you're trying to put through any evictions, then all evictions will be discretionary, right? So previously there were some evictions, like if a tenant was being evicted for rent arrears and they were in rent arrears for a period of 3 months, and you could prove that, then that would be a mandatory eviction. There'd be no kind of like, defense there. If you had all the evidence and the proof, then tribunal should rule in your favor. But now they're saying everything is discretionary. And if the tenant doesn't vacate after you give the notice, then the tribunal will basically decide what is reasonable based on, the circumstances, and if that's because of coronavirus that they have lost their job or something like that, the likelihood of you getting a tenant out is probably pretty unlikely. The other thing to basically point out here is that a lot of the grounds for eviction, now there's 18 different grounds that you can evict a tenant on in the private residential tenancy agreement. A lot of them were like 28-day notice periods. Like, for example, the rent arrears one, that was a 28-day notice period, right? They've now changed that to 6 months. So you've got to give the tenant 6 months notice if you want to evict them on rent arrears basis. Now that's up to the 30th of September 2020. They could extend that. This might change and it might be extended. As we're talking just now, by the way, a lot of these things could change. This is an ever-changing market with all these different measures.
Thank God I'm doing this podcast for you, Nick. I can keep up to date with all these rules and like legislation that's getting changed constantly.
Yep. So that's probably enough on that. But moving on, we have the number 3 is the changes to the model PRT lease. So the private residential tenancy lease document, which is the contract that we issue tenants, because of that emergency coronavirus bill that they introduced with the different notice periods, what they've done is they've changed the clauses within the lease. So landlords have to be very, very careful that all the leases that they're issuing between this period up until the 30th of September, and again, that could be extended, you need to make sure that if you're doing this and you're self-managing and you're issuing your own lease, if you've got an agent, they should know and they should be doing this for you. But if you're doing this yourself, then if you go to the Scottish Government website, they have a section on there where you can generate your own lease. and we can always put a link to that in the show notes, and they should have updated that now to contain the appropriate clauses that basically relate to notice periods and that. Moving on, there are some new council tax legislation. So basically, there was an attempt for landlords to kind of lobby government to try and get it so that any empty properties were exempt from council tax, but that failed, and they came back and said that they would allow any properties that were previously let by students, and students had then handed in their notice and disappeared, because we had a lot of students who basically just disappeared off the face of the earth and returned home when all this happened, and they went home early. What they're saying now is if you have a property that's empty that had been habited by a student, then you can apply for an exemption, which is quite good. And it's actually one that I didn't know until quite recently.
How are they going to police that then? Are they going to ask for proof who the tenant was and that they were actually a student? How are they doing that?
I think they'll know because they'll have a record, because obviously the students that were in there previously, they would have already been exempt. So the last resident of that property, they'll have a note of that.
Mm-hmm.
And they'll know whether that was a student that had been living in that property.
Right, that's a good one. I never knew that. That's a good one.
Yeah, so that was a new one on me as well. Once I started doing a bit of research for this show, so that's quite good as well. EPC, the minimum rating requirement. So this was supposed to happen on the 1st of April this year.
Mm-hmm.
You know about this one, so it's going to be the minimum.
I never knew this one was getting postponed either. This one really excites me. Yeah, sorry, go on. So
it's going to be like a minimum E rating. So as most people know, you get the different bands, and E is quite poor anyway. But actually, to be honest with you, quite a lot of my properties that I manage, whether they've got electric heating or poor insulation, some of them are like E. So I'm just on the threshold with some of these, and this was going to be the minimum requirement if you were renting a property. You had to get to the E. And so now that's been
some improvements like insulation, upgraded heating systems, double glazing windows, stuff like that, to improve that energy efficient rating. And this is something that's concerned me and made me aware of going into the Aberdeen market. And you've probably been aware of it a longer time. But mine were always houses before that were in my portfolio. And then as soon as I went in the Aberdeen market, it was more like granite, stone, flats with sash and case windows, sometimes electric heating. So when you're actually doing a viewing, it was actually very important to make sure that you're preparing for that future regulation coming in place and checking the EPC to make sure that it would be low enough, or you could get it low enough by putting some improvements in. But again, some of these properties you aren't able to make these improvements. They're, some of the ones on Union Street, they're listed buildings rather than a conservation there, so you can't change the sash and case single glazing windows, and it's not got gas in the buildings, so it's only got electric heating. So there's a lot of the ones there's not a huge amount you can do.
Yeah, well, exactly. And the rural properties as well, some of the rural ones where you're not on the grid for gas central heating and stuff like that. Quite
totally.
So that's that's been totally stopped and postponed, and I'm not sure. There's not been a date for when they're gonna kick that in again. Right. So I don't know when that'll happen. And the last one on the kind of regulation, legislation, government measures, separating. So what I want to talk about in this last point is, through the lockdown, there's been loads of different measures in place by the government, and now they're starting to ease off. But we've still got to, as landlords and letting agents, we've got to separate the necessary from the unnecessary. So a lot of people at the start were quite confused, because how we've got so many certificates to have to do. We've got the EICR, we've got the Legionella, we've got PAT testing, gas safety checks. People were like, well, do we still need to carry these out? Although we're not supposed to be going out, we're not supposed to be leaving our homes. So what they said was, the only one you still need to do is the gas safety check. So that's the one that's still mandatory. The other ones, they can be held off for just now, but you need to carry out the gas.
How long can it be held off for? Are they going to re-announce that to say that it's back to normal? Or?
Yeah, there's not been a time scale that I know of anyway. So I think that, and with the gas, some people were still confused with the gas safety thing. They were saying, well, I can't get my gas engineer out. He's not working, or the guy I usually use is not operating just now. He's in lockdown. Well, you either need to show that you've been actively trying to do it, or else if the tenant, say for example, was self-isolating or had coronavirus and rejected any access to the property, then you should have an email saying that you had tried to contact the tenant, and you should have a reply saying that you got refused access for the gas safety. I don't know how much they would enforce that, but it's...
I suppose it's only going to come down to a matter if God forbid somebody dies or gets carbon monoxide poisoning from a gas boiler that was out of date.
Exactly.
And they're going to look into the trail of it and see that there was an attempt to get a gas safety in place.
Yeah, and obviously you just want to cover yourself, don't you? So that is a necessary, right? The other sort of necessaries are like emergency repairs. So that would be like heating, hot water, these sorts of things. If there was a boiler breakdown, that's a necessary as well. The unnecessaries are things like inspections. So that's a thing that I'm dreading, because as a letting agent, I go out every 6 months to do property inspections. These have all been building up, and I'm going to have a pure nightmare once we're allowed back out to properties, because I'm going to have such a backlog. So I'm not looking forward to that one.
You're going to be enlisting my help. You're going to ask my help to come through and do inspections with you.
I was going to say, mate,
you take that list. I'll take the others.
Come through to Glasgow for a couple of days, and I'll pay you £10 an hour.
Brilliant. There we go. Got a job at the back of this.
And the other kind of unnecessary things are, viewings. So if you've got a tenant living in a property and they've handed in their notice, then you really ought to be waiting till they move out. And really, the lockdown measures were so severe that you shouldn't have even been going out to do viewings, even if it was by yourself in the property as well. Now, obviously, some people did, some people didn't. But anyway.
Superb. Cheers for that roundup. I think you'd separate that into legal and then some financial sides as well that had obviously changed during it. So I think probably the first one that you would cover would be the mortgage holidays that were offered pretty much as soon as we went in lockdown. Is that right?
Yeah. So obviously, do you want to speak about that?
Yeah. So, I mean, most of the lenders announced that, people were getting mortgage holidays, and there was a bit of a hoo-ha straight away, in the press. I think before we even went into lockdown, they announced that landlords were getting mortgage holidays. And I think a lot of tenants saw that as they're getting a holiday from their mortgage. We should be getting a holiday from our rent. And obviously we managed to kind of whittle out that wasn't the case. So basically you were getting a period of not paying your mortgage, which was the money you didn't pay was getting added to your remaining balance of your mortgage. And obviously you'd pay interest on that payment as well. So it wasn't a holiday. It actually cost you more money to take it. Now, a lot of landlords, I know, they jumped at the chance of, just in case, didn't know how long lockdown went on, they didn't know if tenants would be able to pay, they jumped at the chance of taking the mortgage holiday. I think you were the same opinion as me, that you kind of held off, thinking that as much as I said that it wouldn't affect your financial credit rating, it would still come up on your credit file when going for future lending, and lenders maybe not see as quite, it's quite favourable if as soon as we've came into crisis, you've effectively ran for the hills and asked for a holiday on your mortgages. So it's good that they were supportive of that if people were in hardship, but
and it's kind of like, it's uncharted water. So the problem that I had with the whole thing was people were saying, oh no, it won't affect your... There was different reports. Some people were saying it would affect your ability for mortgage lending and your credit file, and some people were saying no. And I just thought, do you know what? I don't want to take the risk, because it's uncharted territory, and I just don't want to have that box to tick. Like, they're going to ask you the question in future, did you request a mortgage holiday? Do you know what I mean? It's probably they'll have that in the form somewhere.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I took exactly the same stance on it as well. It's not shown up yet, but I think it will do in the future. And if mortgage lending tightens up in the coming years, I think that'll be one of the questions on the application. And if that could be the deciding factor where you get in your loan for your next buy-to-let purchase or not. So that was the reason why I decided to stay away from it.
Just off the back of that, if you are a landlord who you have had your tenant who stopped paying rent, and you have had to go down the route of, getting a mortgage holiday, and you found that the only way you can do it, and you're still having trouble, you're still finding financial hardship, then this is another point, there was the Scottish government had introduced a PRS, so private residential sector landlord loan for non-business landlords. So that's not limited company, that's just normal personal name landlords that have under 5 properties, and there is interest-free loans available. So not grants, loans that need to be paid back, but they're interest-free. That's for people who really, really need them. But again, I don't think there was a huge uptake on it.
Mm. The next point that probably would cover from the financial side was the support that the government gave on bounce back loans. So all businesses were offered up to £50,000 or 25% of your turnover, interest free for the first year, 100% backed by the government, and I believe it was 2.5% interest for the remaining 5 years to pay back the loan. So I think a lot more people jumped on that, and I was from a personal point of view, it's free money for a year. There's no penalty to take it. There's no penalty to pay it back before the year. So if you took the £50,000, put it in your account, sat there as a buffer, and if you didn't need to use it, pay it back at month 10, month 11, whatever, you don't pay a single penalty. So to me, it was free money, and it was, I think it was a really good scheme with the government to help the economy bounce back, as the loan states. You got any thoughts on that one?
Yeah, absolutely. We've talked about this. You took one, Stephen, and I've taken one as well. And I'm probably in the process of applying for another one for one of my other companies. And, there was a lot of chat about this, could you invest in property? Were HMRC going to look back and pull you up for this later down the line? How were they going to look at it? But I think we came to the kind of conclusion that, I don't think it was really anything to do with tax at the end of the day. It's a loan, and, you're going to pay that back.
So
and
you do it as you see fit for your business, yeah.
Yeah, I think if it obviously has been created for people who have been affected. You could argue that you have been affected because, you've maybe taken a drop in rent. Some tenants have not paid full rents, and you're going to use this to propel your business forward. And ultimately, it's going to help the economy as well. So I think it's a fantastic scheme by the kind of government have backed. First 12 months interest free. After that, 2.5%.
Yeah.
I wasn't aware. I'm pretty sure this is the case, right? But I wasn't aware that I thought you had to have a business bank account going into the whole thing. I actually know somebody who opened up a business bank account, in the last couple of weeks, I think it was, and then they applied for it. Now, they had been trading as a sole trader prior to, I think there was a date prior to the something of March when the whole thing kicked in. So they had been previously trading, but they just opened up the account and they were eligible and they got the loan as well. So
that's good.
Even if you don't have a business bank account at the moment, I think you can still open one up and get the loan. So
that's good. And do you want to go over the last point you had on for the financial side of it?
Yeah, so this was basically just if you're a landlord and you have been hit by tenants who have not been able to pay rent, and they might have lost their job and they've had to go down the route of claiming universal credit. Now, we did a whole podcast on this with Bill Irvin, which you should go back and listen to, on universal credit. It was really good. This guy was a universal credit expert, and he went right into the detail. But he told us that the Department of Work and Pensions, who basically are in charge of universal credit now, and that's obviously universal credit, they pay out a housing allowance for people's rent. They have now developed an online service, an online system, whereby if the tenant falls into arrears, I think it's of 2 months, that now you can apply for the rent to be paid direct to the landlord, and it's now a lot more streamlined to be able to do that. Whereas before it was a big carry-on about having to download a paper form and get that signed by the tenant, and it was just very cumbersome, quite difficult to do. Apparently it's quite easy now, and that could definitely help people in their chasing of rent arrears and to get tenants back paying again. So I think there's positive moves there on the universal credit side of things.
Superb. That's a brilliant roundup, and I never really anticipated or realised how much it actually changed in a short period of time. But you doing that bit of research and actually documenting that in a step-by-step numbered guide showed you, wow, there's been a lot of changes in our industry in the last few months. So just for the benefit of the listeners, maybe could you do a quick recap on these points that you covered? Just a quick rattle through them.
Yeah, sure. So it's the Fair Rents Bill, which has not been passed yet, but probably will be. You've got the changes to the evictions procedures. Basically, you can't evict now. Most of the grounds are 6 months notice periods. The changes to the PRT lease, make sure you download the correct one and issue that to the tenant. Council tax exemption for properties which were previously occupied by students that have now vacated. The EPC minimum standards have now been postponed now, and we don't have a date for that, when they're going to be introduced again. The necessary and unnecessary tasks that you can do as a landlord during lockdown, we talked about them. On the financial side, you've got the mortgage holidays, you've got the bounce back loans, you've got the private residential sector loans for private landlords with under 5 properties. And lastly, you've got the latest changes by the DWP with their universal credit direct payments system for landlords. So there you go.
Super, Nick. That's brilliant. Good roundup there. Thanks very much for going over that. Just before we finish up,
you're actually sleeping, Stephen. Don't lie. You're falling asleep here.
Just before we finish up this podcast, can we do a quick check out of the reviews? And we'd like to thank everyone who's been leaving us a review so far. And if you haven't, please do. It helps us get our reach and our exposure out on the podcast channel. So this one's came from Liam Harley 93. Really good insight into the Scottish property sales and letting economy, down to earth and plenty of personal experience added. So thanks very much for that 5-star review, Liam. We very much appreciate it. What's been happening on the podcast Facebook page, Nick?
Podcast Facebook is brilliant. I love going on there, and it's great because you've got loads of people that are just starting out and just needing to get a bit of a boost, and loads of people on there helping each other out. So I think we've kind of extended that group into the kind of Monday night live, and I think a lot of people show up on Monday night. So this is Monday night, 8 p.m. We're making this a weekly thing now. So this is the Zoom call that we do each and every Monday night.
I think it's been quite good for the property community in Scotland as well, because like you say, there's been regularly people. I think we've had almost 100 people on the calls, and we were a little less last week, but I think it's good for people just we're not getting to socialise, we're not getting to go to networking events, we're not getting to go to group viewings or have a coffee with people as well. So it's quite nice to chat and see the familiar faces that you're seeing posting in the group and engaging in the group, and you get to put a face to name, and people come on and ask questions, or people just sit and listen. It's been really, really engaging. I'm really enjoying the Monday night chats.
Yep, absolutely. So join us again this Monday, 8 p.m. We'll send out the event, and you can register, and you can get the link from Eventbrite as well. So thanks very much for listening, guys. Hope you've not found that too boring. I hope you found it useful, and we will see you again next week. Bye for now.
Superb. See you next week. Bye for now.